Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Grow Yours podcast, where we talk to coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, everything about their business growth, and how they help people in their very special way. Because everybody's got their own really niche, knowledgeable way of helping people. And I think that is the best thing about this show. So today I am joined by Will Fuentes, who is the founder of Maestro Group, a company that transforms sales teams through scientifically backed training. Now, there is a ton that goes into this, stuff that I don't know much about, but Will knows a ton. I'm really excited to get into it. Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks, and you got the memo about the color for today, huh?
Yeah. I wear the same type of black shirt for every single podcast because I just hate deciding what do I need to wear today to be on recording.
Also, if you record 5 of them in a day, no one knows that it was 5 in the same day, right? So there you
Yeah,
go.
that's another positive there. But that I was trying to keep a secret. All right, awesome. So before we get into your business and what you guys do and how you manipulate the mind, so to speak, tell
Oof.
us a little bit about your career and how you became an entrepreneur and the whole journey there.
Sure. But we don't teach manipulation. We teach facilitation for
Yes,
decision making.
I was
So
joking. I was joking around.
uh,
I was joking around.
I know. I'm just messing with you. So really interesting. I graduated early from college, went straight to law school, failed the bar, was a really crappy lawyer, ended up working in retail, and was really successful in retail. And over time, I figured out that I had a unique way of thinking about how to move very slow moving products to people that actually wanted it. And so eventually, the idea came to me that maybe I should start a software company. So I did. So I started a software company. It's a little bit ahead of its time, about 3 to 4 years ahead of its time in terms of how it facilitated the communication and stuff. But overarching, the idea was good and the technology was good. And along the way, I was able to sell the vision and the dream to organizations as well as to investors. Um, I started then coming, after I left that company, I started consulting on the side to sales teams that were selling into retailers around like how to move those deals faster. And had some great success in teaching teams that, so much so that one of my first clients offered me a job. That job lasted 30 days. We did not get along in terms of employee employer as much as well as we did as consultant client. And so my son's first day of kindergarten, he fired me for all intents and purposes. And in the time it took me to get up from my chair and walk the 100 feet to my car, I felt sorry for myself for about those 100 feet. And as soon as I got in my car, I called my wife and said, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna start a company, and it's gonna be focused on teaching people how to sell. And oh, by the way, I don't really have any money in the bank, but I need half of what I got in order for us to build this company." And she said, "All right, let's do it." And so that was 9 years ago, because my son's going into ninth grade this year. So I was 9 years ago when I started on this journey. And the reality was I was teaching people how to sell, but I was literally just teaching them best practices that innately I knew. And I knew there was something deeper. And so what I did was I hired some behavioral and industrial organizational psychologists to kind of follow me around, listen to my calls, and help me figure out like what was it that I was doing that actually had some science behind it and what was art. And anything that was art, I dumped out and said, not teaching people that. The art is the authenticity. But the science, I will teach people. And that was 700 clients ago.
Wow. So it seems like you were kind of a serial entrepreneur
Yeah.
before you got into finding this success. Was there a moment in retail where you knew that sales was going to be the core of the rest of your life?
Yeah. I sold, think of this like a big box retailer. You walk in, if you look at my resume, you'll see where I worked. But I sold a 6-figure deal to one individual. So someone walked in, like literally into your regular like electronic store, and he walked out having purchased over $100,000 of equipment and stuff for his house because I took the time to understand what was going on in his life. He was moving into a new home, what he was trying to build, and instead of just being like, "Yeah, I'll get you the biggest TV you need," I literally started to understand. Oh wait, it's high-end house, right? Let's get him high-end appliances. Let's get him, the best control panels. Let's all of this stuff and the wine. And so then I was like, whoa, like I have a really good way of thinking about things. This is going to be it. This is going to be where I make my bones.
So you knew that you knew what was going on, and then, like you said, when you started the company, you were just kind of teaching them what you knew. What sparked the idea in your head that you were like, "Hey, I need to bring some psychologists into the onto the team"?
So really, what was interesting was I was teaching really young professionals um, what I knew how to do. Right, I was teaching, and they would adopt it. But any sort of like mid to late stage professionals that were in those trainings, it was much more difficult to get them to adopt my methodology. There was a lot of pushback, right? It's like, well, who's this guy? Like, he doesn't know us. He doesn't know the industry. He doesn't know that, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't know our product. He doesn't know our buyer, right? There was just all of this pushback. And so in my mind, it was like, the stuff works. It works regardless of who you're selling to. So if that's true, then there's probably got to be some sort of like, and you know, I went to a science and tech high school, so like I already was like just really thought about the sciences a lot. Thought about how can science can give us explanations for anything in the world, right? And so I was like, there's got to be a reason why this stuff works. And so really it was like, if I want to be able to build a business here, I have to be able to convince a lot of people, regardless of where they are in their journey in a career, that this is the right way to do it. And the best way to do it is like, it's like you really can't like deny math and you can't deny science, right? So like, if I can find that, then I'll be able to like get people to adopt it quicker and faster to lead to better results.
So let's talk about the results and how you've integrated behavioral science into your sales trainings to really give salespeople the edge and help them boost revenue. What is the I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask, but what is the
Oh,
core of that? What is the core of using behavioral science?
yeah. So the core of it is understanding where people are when you're meeting them. So what I mean by that is the prospect. Where's the prospect? And the prospect is in a fight and flight mode because they don't know you. You're a stranger. And then not only that, you're a threat. Why are you a threat? Because all of their previous experiences in sales have likely, not all of them, but the majority have been poor. And there's a lot of distrust. And so the core is to start off from a behavior about understanding that this person is in a place of distrust with you. And so how do you start to build small incremental pieces of trust in order to facilitate the decision making? And the best way to be able to have honest conversations is to have someone trust you, right? And so that's really at this core, it's its essence. So one of our first things we teach people is like, hey, listen, like sales isn't dirty, but for those that are not in sales, they actually think it's dirty. They actually think that you're like not trying to you're out there to get them, that you're trying to pull one over on them. And that's what you're fighting, that prejudice. And so the sooner you can accept that, the sooner you can start to work on how do you build trust with humans.
So, can you give a particular example of how somebody like me would do that in a sales call? How do I build that trust initially without knowing the person or having much background besides what a CRM says or something like that?
So number one is going to be presenting yourself authentically. If you've ever seen a stand-up comedian who tries to do different shtick or tries to deliver his jokes differently, the inauthenticity doesn't land. We are pre-wired to see inauthentic people as threats, right? So like that's number one. So you got to approach it number one. Number two is you want to be very cognizant of what matters to people in this initial conversation. So for me, every initial conversation would go like this. It would be like, hey, Giuseppe, we are scheduled for the next 25 minutes. Does that still work for you? So think about that. We have just jumped on a call. You don't know me, but the first thing I have done is shown you that I value what you value, which is time, our most precious resource. I've also now like framed it up that if there's an opportunity here for you that like, that you need to leave early, the anxiety gets washed away because you can tell me that. Otherwise, we have now connected on this like very simple, like, hey, I'm not here to waste your time. You've told me what you can give me, and that is all I'm trying to take.
That seems too simple to be true. I'm trying that tomorrow.
So, and it's funny because we teach people that, right? And it's like, so there's a couple of things. Fear of the unknown, right? How, there's all these things that are going through people's minds. So you're going to try to overcome that. The time check, which is what that's called, is one of the steps. The agenda is another one. Also, the agenda also frames it up vastly different than other calls that they've had, because often people just jump in and there's no rhyme or reason to what's going to happen. So now I'm setting you up by actually walking you through hey, I'm a professional. I'm different than what you're used to encountering, and I value my time so much that I've come prepared. Now, doesn't mean that you go from zero trust to 100% trust. But what it does mean is that it's a grain of sand in building that sandcastle of trust that you're trying to build with someone, right? Just by showing them these little differences. Now, the beauty is that if you do that the second call and the third call, that consistency makes trust happen, right? The reason you end up trusting people in your lives is they behave consistently, and that consistency becomes familiar. Thus, you're no longer afraid of the unknown. They're the known. You know what you're going to get. It's the same reason why when I communicate via email, it's the same structure every single time. It's the exact same structure. I want you to feel familiarity with me, because familiarity breeds trust.
So, following the trust building concept, where else does neuroscience come into the sales? I don't want to say just the call, but the cycle as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, throughout, all the way throughout it, right? So there's a couple of things, right? So I want to be able to connect something visually to words. So I use a lot of slides to connect concepts to the words that I'm speaking, right? Specifically visuals, not wordy slides. It's something that you'll remember, right? Why? Because that'll stick into your brain, into your mind. That's one thing. Number two is when I'm asking for time in the sales cycle, I always ask for 3 times. Why? Because if I ask for 2, your brain processes that as good versus bad. It's difficult to make a choice. If I give you 3, how do you think your brain processes it?
I'm assuming it's worst, middle, best.
Good, better, best,
Good,
not
better,
worst, middle,
best.
best. Yeah, it's actually good, better, best, right? And so again, I'm now changing your mindset on thinking about spending time with me from a good choice, a bad choice, to a good choice, a better choice, and a best choice. What's going to work best for me, right? And so here that allows me to move things through the funnel faster, right? I also do it consistently. The fact that I'm doing it consistently, again, breeds familiarity, right? So you can trust me. You can trust those engagements. Remember, I always ask you hey, we're scheduled for 25 minutes. We're scheduled. Does that still work for you? I'm doing that every single time. The beauty of it is if I'm done early, I'm done early, and I let you off. Again, showing you that I value those things. So all I'm doing in your brain here is, again, making you believe, which is true, that I value you as much as I value myself and my time.
Do salespeople ever give you the pushback that causes them to lose authority in the conversation because you're giving the prospect so much leeway and control over what we do and when we do it?
It's game theory. So yeah, they think that, right? But it's second, third level tertiary thinking, right? You're thinking much deeper. So if I say to you, hey, we're scheduled for the next 30 minutes, and you say, sorry, well, I only have 15, then okay, right? Well, would I rather find that out in the first minute of the call or in the 14th minute of the call?
The first, definitely.
Yeah, right. So that's what I would tell salespeople is you're still in control here. There's you lose all control if at the 14th minute they're hey, I gotta go. But if they're hey, listen, you know what? I pushed out my meeting because the conversation's going so well. I pushed out my meeting. You have a lot of control, but you also now have a good idea of what's going on in their mind. They're enjoying the conversation. They feel there's value there. There's a lot there. I always tell people you have to cede a little bit of this control to have control over the long term. And for me, that's, again, time's my most valuable asset. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking to you if you have no interest in talking to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What else do salespeople, when you typically, I guess the older ones, right? Because young people are pretty moldable. It's easy to tell them hey, do this. It'll help you make more money, and they'll just do it. But what other type of pushback do you see a lot from mid to older sales teams when you start introducing these ideas to them?
So what's interesting is it's the reverse. The mid to older often have done a lot of these things. They learned it at some point. They executed, but what ended up happening was no one held them accountable to doing it all of the time, so it didn't become habit. The newer people, often it's like, I don't know if you have kids, but I have a kid, right? And oftentimes he'd be like, have you ever thrown a football like this? And it's like, well, no, son, there's a reason why you put your fingers on the laces, right? Like, there's just a way of doing things. And like, often we find, there's things that people can adopt because it's like, that's not too difficult. And then there are things that like salespeople, specifically people that have been good, haven't gotten good results. They literally often say it's because they're great salespeople. But the reality is, if they take a deep look, it might be the right place, the right market, or the right product, right? And they're not necessarily great salespeople. So we often get pushback from younger, very successful salespeople that don't want to change their ways. They don't want to come in prepared. They don't want to think about how the value of understanding and framing questions a certain way from a neuroscience perspective shows someone that you're an authority, shows someone that you're knowledgeable, all of these things. And they don't want to do that because that's hard work. While someone who's mid to older has been like, oh yeah, I used to do that. I hear this all the time. Oh, I used to do that all the time. Yeah, I can't believe I stopped doing that. And it's like, oh, I can adopt that again. So, which is to me is one of the more interesting things. At the beginning, it's always, mid to later stage professionals that are kind of like, I don't need this. That are like, and then after a few sessions, they're like, I love this. And then the younger people are like, yeah, I'll try anything. And then when the hard work happens, the stuff that you really have to get, like practicing questions every single day, that's when they're like, yeah, I don't need that. I'm good.
So how do you instill that consistency back into them, considering they tried it and then now you're trying to get them back into it, but they're still stuck in their old habits? How do you and Maestro really hammer that home?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. So number one is we try to align what we can to someone's CRM so we can track that. Number two is we do a lot of role plays. Number three is we'll do a lot of like call coaching, right, just to assist and help people in it. And the reality is like there's probably 1,000 things that we teach over the course of any sort of program, 12-week program. I don't need you to adopt all 1,000. I actually don't. I want you to adopt at least one that you'll do consistently to make better, whether that's asking open-ended questions, whether that's always doing the time check, whether that's follow up within 12 hours, any of these number of things that we talk about, right? And for me, it's like often sales training and stuff, and this is again comes down to behavioral psychology, all that stuff. Often want people to change who they are. Changing who you are like takes years, if not decades. But you can pick up like a behavior and make it a habit in 45 to 90 days, right? Like, and you can also stop doing certain things in 45 to 90 days, right? Like some take longer, addictions or whatever, but there are things you can stop, right? And so for me to be like, say to someone, hey, I want you to practice question trees every single day for 2 minutes. Work on a question, think of the answers you could possibly get, then think about the next question you would ask based on those answers. They can pick that up fairly easily. If I'm like, I want you to do this thing, plus this thing, plus this thing, plus this thing, plus this thing, behavioral psychology tells us like people are incapable of making that much change in a shorter time. And so for us as a training organization, and this is one of the things I'm always talking to executives about, is like your team needs to adopt some of this. And some of this needs to be non-negotiable. Like we're going to frame what is non-negotiable. It might be like, hey, we follow up every demo with a recap within 24 hours. Great, that's a non-negotiable. That's a thing that needs to happen, right? But there are other behaviors that are best practices, and we don't need to adopt them all. We just need them to adopt a few of them consistently, and that will make them a better salesperson. Like transformative change is, I mean, I don't believe sales trainers can create transformative change like that. I just don't. I don't. I think over time you can if you're consistent with that person and whatever else. I think what you can create is really good habits in 45 to 90 days that makes an organization better. And enough people get better, that becomes transformative.
So as this transformation, obviously these businesses are increasing ROI because their close rate is increasing, and that's just the natural progression of getting better at sales. But something you also mentioned the last time we spoke is increasing average deal size.
Yes.
And so what is the psychology behind that? Like why is that different from smaller transactions?
Yeah. So I think average deal size, there's a couple of things, right? Like, I think two things are happening from a behavioral psychology standpoint. Like we as sales professionals often are afraid to talk money. We grow up in a society where money is not often discussed, right? And so we often shy away from that. We also put our own buying prejudices. I always remember this from my retail days. I always teach my salespeople, like, because I'd have 16-year-olds on the sales phone and be like, who needs a $2,000 washer? I'm like, well, you're 16. Of course you don't think $2,000 is worth it for a wash, but the mom who's got 6 kids who all play sports, who like literally she needs to wash all day long, trust me, she wants that thing that's going to get the things clean and she can do massive loads. That's why, right? And so I always tell people, like, don't bring your own prejudice around this to the conversation. So we got to wash that part away. So that's a little bit of first working on the individuals. The second part of it is that how you present price really matters in terms of how it's accepted. And what I mean by that is, if I'm like, it's about $300 per location, right? Like, it sounds like I'm not even confident in that, right? Versus it's $300 per location. There's a vast difference between what's going to happen in this conversation now, right? When I'm like, it means I'm indicating to you that I don't 100% believe necessarily in this price, and we can have a negotiation. And not only can we have a negotiation, but you're probably in a position of power versus me. Now, when I present it confidently, that doesn't mean we can't have a negotiation. But what you also know is that you're going to have to work for that negotiation a bit more. Why? Because I can confidently present that price. I am now like, telling you, hey, like, there is no doubt in terms of what I find the value to be here. The third thing is around price, is that often organizations get a little bit too caught up in what the price is and should be. And I always tell them price should be nothing more than an opportunity to get a reaction. So if I say to you, hey, that's $300 per location, and you're like, now it's like, seems like, the price I told you, shocked you a little bit. Like, what shocked you about it? What else have you heard? What were you expecting to hear based on the conversations we had? What was the number that you think I was going to quote you? Like, there's any number of things that I can now dig into and align, right? Or if I'm like, hey, 300 per location, you're like, done. Well, what does that tell me? It means that, like, the value that I'm selling, like, is like misaligned, but in your favor, right? That means I could probably go to 330, 350, 400 and continue to test that out. I always tell people, if you have a price where everyone says yes, your price is too low.
I definitely can resonate with not being able to say the price. Like really early on in my business, I would sit there and I'd be like, yeah, it's this much. And they would be like, huh? Speak up. Like, how much is it? And now that, like, I think that has to do with the confidence in your delivery team as well. Because if you do believe your team will deliver, then there's the price. You're right. The price is just a transition of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's funny, as coaches, as consultants, all of this stuff, often, like, we let our own self-doubt creep into how we're going to price things. Right. And, like, so I often work with sales coaches, with just coaches in general, whatever industry that they're in. And I'll be talking to them. I'm like, well, how much you charge? And they'll tell me. I'm like, that's too low. And they're like, why? I'm like, think about the value you're delivering and like what you're charging. And it's like, wait a second. And I remember my first client after I got fired, the first person I pitched, he said, well, what's your rate? And I wrote him back and I told him my rate. About months later, he came up to me and he said to me, hey, you want to hear something? And I said, what? He said, if you had quoted me a lower rate than what you quoted me, I would not have gone with you. And I was like, why? He's like, because I would have felt that you didn't believe that you were good enough to handle my job.
That's honestly awesome.
Yeah.
Um, can you give an example of a client that you coached that had a dramatic shift in their pricing? Do you have anybody
Yes.
that's like an unbelievable change in the amount that they were charging?
Yes. So we have a client who sold a software to large enterprises that really facilitated how employees of the enterprises managed their benefits, looked at their benefits, managed all their benefits, etc. They were basically charging for the platform $20,000 per year. They were selling to a very large organization. By the time we were done, which was 6 months later, the standard platform price was $150,000.
That is a dramatic difference. And did the actual product change at all, or
No,
strictly just the way that they were selling and the psychology behind their sales process?
how they sold it, how we packaged it, how we presented the price, right? With like what they got, everything that they got, all this stuff, right? What was included, what wasn't included, all this stuff, which didn't change. Nothing of that changed. It's just that we were articulating that earlier in the sales cycle, as well as later when we presented price, right? So often they would say things, they had like this 24/7. They really did have 24/7, like, employee service. They had a call center, they had set one up, et cetera, here based in America. Right. So like literally they could like an employee could call up middle of the night and be like, oh my God, is this covered, whatever, right? And they would get an answer. Um, and they would never like they didn't necessarily present that as a value to the client, right? Like
Yeah,
they didn't like
that's
and it's like, wait, why aren't you talking about this? Like this is like there's a real value here. Like
yeah. A
this
lot of people, I feel that they think things should be included because they would expect that from something they were buying. So
yes.
when they're presenting like their value stack or whatever strategy that they use to show, like, hey, I'm giving you all this for the price of this, they don't include a lot of things because they're like, oh, it's not that important.
Yeah, and also, we also put into their motion that we would do research ahead of a discovery call um, around like the total number of employees, right? So we would have an idea of the employees. We knew what the platform was going to cost, and then when someone would ask for a price, they'd be like, "Oh, it's $3 per year per employee," right? It's like $3 per year per employee. You have 50,000 employees, $150,000 a year, right? But like $3 per employee doesn't sound like much.
Sounds like nothing.
Yeah, it's 27 cents a month per employee.
Yeah, it's all about how you phrase it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean any number of those things. And by the way, that was I spent a lot of time in retail, and retail, is an incredible proving ground around the psychology of sales, right? Go look at the Costco model, go look at any of the great retailers in terms of how they product, how they price, how they do all of these things and everything else. And there's just been so much psychology in it. And one of the things for us in the electronic space was you want to sell service plans, right? And so like identifying kind of how the service plan matches up to the value of what someone's buying, to how the service plan matches up in terms of like how much you're paying per day, like all of these things like really matter in terms of like, okay, like how do I present this? And so just taking what works often in great direct to consumer businesses and applying that in business to business actually is really valuable, right? Because at the end of the day, we're still selling to people. We're still selling to people, and people need to go and have that conversation. So imagine I'm selling to you and you got to go discuss it with finance, and it's like $150,000 sounds really expensive. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I'll tell you what doesn't sound expensive. Oh, it's $3 per employee per year.
Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to figure out how I could incorporate that for myself. But we spoke a whole lot about sales, which is super important. Obviously, probably the most important lever you could pull for your business to grow. But there's always I don't want to say rival because it's either rival or best friend, and that's marketing. So
Yeah.
in every business, yeah, you need to have your sales, but your marketing also needs to be dialed in. So I'm curious how you, as a sales coach, have been able to market yourself all these years and grow your business and find new clients.
Uh, yeah. So I think number one is we've kept really good data, so we understand the value that we deliver, and I can speak to that. Number two is I've literally grown my business through referrals, right? So we have a 1.8 referral coefficient, which means for every 10 clients, I get 18 referrals, right? And then when you're closing at, depending on the year, anywhere between 60 to 90% of all opportunities, like that's how you grow your business. And I tell coaches, I tell consultancies, smaller ones, not the very large ones, but the more boutique ones, that like creating a very strong referral motion is one of the best and fastest ways for you to grow before you start investing in marketing. Now we invest in marketing in a different way. I host a lot of private dinners where I bring in prospects and clients together to have conversations, no agenda, often. The last one we did have a little bit of agenda because of I'm in the DC area, so there was a lot of talk around how to work with the new administration, tariffs, and then AI. Those were the three topics. And so I brought people in for those particular topics, but mostly it's like, hey, I'm putting together a dinner. There's a couple of people in there that could help you grow your business. You could help them. I think you should come to dinner. And I grow my business that way as well by having these little small private events.
So you really haven't used any other type of marketing funnels besides referral, and you've been able to grow for 9 years?
The other one is stages. So years ago when I
Ah,
was first starting out, right? So like speaking engagements, I do a lot of speaking engagements. And so, you know, if someone offers, I'm like, yep, I'm there. Right? Like I'm there. Right? High school, sure, why not? Right? Like college, sure, why not? Bid, yeah, why not? Economic development, sure, I'll do it. Right? So a lot of stages. That's really the other marketing channel. But the most powerful one has been the referrals.
so in these speaking engagements, are you strictly talking about sales? Because you just named like three very different things, like economic development, high school, college, and I forgot the other thing you said actually off the top of my head. But were all of your approaches to all these speaking engagements the same?
No, 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 no. That's a great question, right? When I'm speaking to CEOs, I'm often brought in because there's either a seminar that they're hosting or there's some sort of program where they need a speaker for the day on sales and marketing alignment. When I'm speaking, to schools, right? I think they're really what I'm working on, and the idea is that I'm just practicing my craft of being a public speaker, being out there, being able to tell a good story, right? Be able to like just work on what it means to be able to to connect with an audience. Why? Because then when I go out to actually speak at like these other events, if I can connect with a 15-year-old kid who has no interest in hearing what I have to say, trust me, I can then connect with the CEO whose business is like on its last legs, right? And so I kind of use it almost as like as a training ground. But the reality is that for me, stages and referrals are been the two biggest channels for us to grow our business.
So it seems in both of those channels, a lot of that heavily weighs on you and your brand and
Yes.
your existence within the company. And I know last time we spoke, you mentioned you're thinking of stepping away or just taking a smaller role. I forgot what you said exactly. So, how are you building foundations for your team to grow past that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So we've developed all of our training into self-paced training so that people can use. So there's a digital asset for that. We're also hosted our first conference. And yes, I did deliver some of the topics, but a lot of my team delivered the majority of the content for the day. We're now hosting our second one. Third is identifying talent within my organization. There's a gentleman named Asad Ali. I actually hired him when he was 16 to his first job, and now has come back after being a multi-exited founder to learn how to run a sales training company. Who's fantastic on the stage and stuff, and I can hand over the reins to him. And so it's kind of that succession plan, thinking of the succession plan on the analog side, like human being who can handle this thing, and then the other one has been the digital side of it is like, can we create enough digital assets and community in order to keep this thing sustainable and growing beyond kind of what is limited by, again, our most precious resource, time, and my time specifically.
What advice would you give to other founders about building a team that is essentially an extension of you? What do you think is the most important aspect in a new hire who is going to be a part of the core team?
Mental horsepower.
What was
I
that?
hire for mental horsepower,
Oh,
being smart.
mental horsepower. Okay. I like that.
Like, so it's funny. I hire for intelligence first and foremost. That's the number one thing. I actually don't care about your background. I don't care what schools you went to. I don't care any about that. I just care how smart you are, how much you've learned, right? Like how curious you are. Those are the things, right? Like, and like, how do you apply that stuff? Um, then after that, right? Like, I want grit. I want people that are just going to push through and be able to solve things on their own. And I know everybody says that. But the reality is that someone's trying to grow their team, you have to give your team a lot of agency and a lot of opportunity to be able to develop things, to innovate, et cetera. And so when people come join Maestro, one of the first things is like, listen, I've hired you because you're smart. Often I'm going to give you projects with very little direction outside of the outcome that I'm seeking. And the reason is because if I tell you how to do it, then I'm going to limit kind of the innovation and perspective that you bring to the task. And that doesn't help me or the organization grow. So a lot of the things that we have developed have been because it's like we need this outcome. And then someone comes up with something. I'm like, I never in a million years would have imagined doing it that way. And that is so much better for our clients. And so that then allows me to productize that thing and then sell it and grow it, et cetera, right? And so we've created a great culture of innovation in our company.
When building that company culture in a essentially digital working world, do you feel that it requires a lot of in-person touch points, or you feel like that's still possible in the digital age? Because I am someone, I graduated college 2021, and essentially all of my jobs have been virtual up until me starting my business. And I honestly never felt like I was part of a team. I felt like I was a tool in the company, but never felt connected. So how do you build that within Maestro?
Yeah, so there are people on my team that I've never seen in person,
Hmm. Naturally.
right? Years. There are people on my team that have like worked with me for, 6, 7, 8 years that I've seen maybe in person 3 or 4 times, right? And we have a really strong culture and a lot of sense of belonging. So there's a couple of things. Number one is when we started this talk around like trust and authenticity. I bring my authentic self to the job. I can be super serious, but there is a like silly, fun streak in me. And so, it's not uncommon for me to crack a joke in the middle of a internal presentation, right? And it's not uncommon for someone to crack a joke on me and, we all laugh or whatever else it is. We also, make sure that we share with each other a lot of the things that are going in our lives outside of work. So we do a thing called Around the Horn. We have Slack channels where we post pictures, kids, dogs, whatever else. We have a memes channel. So if you're scrolling and you find something really, really funny, it goes in there. And like, it's like, hey, like, you're not going to be judged for sharing what you thought was funny. Now, if it's completely out of bounds, I'll have a conversation with you, but like everybody treats it with a lot of respect, right? And so there's all of these opportunities that like we share with each other to show our whole selves, and I think that breeds a lot of just community within our organization.
On that note, I think that is a great way to end it off because I feel like what I'm trying to do here is create a community outside of my organization, and I hope people get the same get take that idea that you just portrayed and could feel it from this podcast. But before we get out of here, Will, you want to tell everybody where they can find you and where they can find Maestro?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I've got a newsletter called Fuentes Fridays. Subscribe. I do sales tips. If you see my authentic self, something that made me laugh, a quote that I shared with my son is something I learned this week, and then a random potpourri section that I share. Number two is you can go to the maestrogroup.co. It is a .co. In there, you can learn all about Maestro. We also have an amazing blog written by professional writers called the Maestro Mastery. Everything that you've ever want to learn about sales and behavioral psychology and industrial is in there. We've written, I think, 250, 300 blogs at this point. Every single week, we're consistent. So remember, consistency breeds trust. So you can go find us there as well.
All right, awesome. Everybody, this has been the Grow Yours podcast. I thought this one was super interesting, super insightful. Will, thank you for your time. And everybody, we will see you next time.
Great. Thank you.